Hey folks, and welcome to Let's Talk. This is my show where I sit down with subject matter experts and or people well-versed in a certain topic in tabletop, and we editorialize, give our opinions, and generally discuss the comings, goings, and current hot news. Now, this isn't necessarily as G-rated as the rest of GMG, so viewer and listener discretion is advised. Hey everybody, one other episode of Let's Talk. I'm back with Chris, and he is...
Reading White Dwarf.
Reading White Dwarf. He got here and immediately saw the White Dwarfs I reviewed this week and was like, because we went to the hobby shop before we got here, and I picked up the Kill Team manual because I didn't have one, and I picked up the the new White Dwarf, this month's White Dwarf, and then Chris immediately was pawing through them, and then saw some White Dwarfs from 30 years ago, and then it was all over. He started reading through those.
They're a lot more interesting.
So you've since you were last on we did a nostalgia episode, you have legitimately lost your fucking mind over old models. You've been painting like crazy. You've painted more miniatures in the last month since that episode, I think, than I've seen you paint in a long time.
Painted a lot more miniatures with care.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
There's some stuff where I have assembly line.
Right.
I finished painting a 2,000 point Space Marine army, and I'm done with Space Marines for another decade. So Games Workshop, 10 years from now, when you put out 12th edition. That's the next time I'm going to make a Space Marine army. I'm not making another Space Marine army again. I'm done.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
And just going back, and we discussed it in our nostalgia episode, making just.
We'll grab some on your case. I'll get some photos and we'll overlay them so people can see what you've been working on. Because you kind of like cherry picked your favorites for painting here. This is your Orc and Goblin War, man.
I'm sort of my philosophy is whatever is the peak Warhammer for me.
For you personally.
So yeah.
Not necessarily for everybody else.
So, peak Orc and Goblins for me is 4th edition.
Yeah.
That's sort of that Kev Adams redesign or evolution of his older designs. Where the orcs get, they're stooped, but their heads get bigger. There's so much character in those models, and you don't see that in, here, I'll start with the Biggins.
Just throw them in front of me, I'll take some pictures.
Biggins.
And so which Biggins did you pick here? You got
these are the two that I dug out of my basement, because they were part of my 4th edition Orc and Goblin army, which is really when I started playing Warhammer. I had played some 3rd edition, but it was mostly just demo games at the Silver Snail that they ran.
Good old Silver Snail.
So I wasn't actually. I was actively painting at that time, but I wasn't really playing Warhammer. I was that young guy,
the aspirant. You were basically hanging out with the wargamers, being like, "Yo, guys, include me. I want to learn about this."
So it was really when that 4th edition box set came out.
So this might be my favorite orc of all time. The dude with the pointy hat, this guy right here in the middle.
He's
pretty great. He might be my favorite. I think.
But all of these.
Was he used as a unit champion a lot in White Dwarf? Because I'm pretty sure he was one of the unit champions. He's just
got a fancy hat. There's one similar to him that was the boss for the Stone Thrower.
Oh yeah,
which I don't have. I had and has been lost.
Pass me your character sheets. I need to bounce some light on these guys. I'm gonna get a picture of them.
I've been
just anything. Just needs to be white. It'll bounce light. Perfect. There we go. I get a decent picture of them. It'll bounce some light on their chests. Pro tip, guys: if you need to bounce some light, just grab a sheet of paper. If you don't have something, it'll reflect it, and you get a better photo. There we go. No, but those orcs in particular, I think, represent like a certain period in like.
Well, they're significant for Games Workshop
design,
too, because that was when that 4th edition was. We talked about. You and I talked earlier about 3rd edition,
right?
And that's sort of where my madness is heading. I'm heading back in time to actually play really old editions, of Warhammer. And 4th edition was very much the evolution of 3rd edition.
Right.
So
it made it a little less impenetrable, I think, because it cleaned up the army lists.
It kept the core system. It trimmed some stuff out. You obviously lost 3 stats.
Yep.
So you lost intelligence, cool, and willpower.
But you gained them in Rogue Trader. Weirdly, they kept him for that.
but in 2nd edition 40k they were gone too.
They were gone too.
Like, so the only thing that they maintained them in was fantasy roleplay, which made sense. So they cleaned up some of the mechanics, because if you look, I was reading through my 3rd edition rulebook, and I was amazed because just the movement section on how to move your units, how to align them, how to rank them up, how to wheel. That's more then the entire Age of Sigmar rulebook
That's 112
is
pages,
just the movement section.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a game of maneuvering, right?
It was, and less reliance on rolling dice and far more reliance on where you're positioning your guys
Right.
and who those guys are and who you're matching them up against. So I mean, how important deployment was in the game in terms of not building overlapping aura bubbles, which seems to be the meta now, but just like who's going to fight who
and
who's going to set up for that flank charge. What sort of nasty tricks do you have? So that's it's
awesome. I think my favorite part about these miniatures is the shields. The fact they have embossed shields.
Those are
with, like,
old
the faces
Marauder
on them.
shields. So those are actually not technically period accurate for these models.
Right.
These models would have the basic
plastic shield,
round shield.
These are
these are embossed Marauder shields that I found.
No. I mean,
they're amazing.
They even though they wouldn't have come with the miniatures back then. They fit the style of these miniatures perfectly.
Absolutely, yeah.
They have that John Blanche, evil son, sort of like grim face.
This one's my favorite one, which is why I stuck it on a big one, of course.
He's got the screaming mouth face.
Yeah.
So let's see some goblins. You got some orcs, you had some big uns, you had some basic orc raiders.
I got some everything. So here
Did you paint a plastic goblin? Is that one plastic goblin, or is that guy metal?
I have no plastic goblins.
I think I was.
This is the metal one that
looks just like the plastic one. That's right. Yeah.
So
he's awesome.
He's a third edition, like late third edition plastic goblin. And they based the plastic goblins in the fourth edition starter set on that model.
Yeah. Because he looks just like it. And then you got some bows.
Oh, I got so many goblins, man. And I have like another...
This guy's my favorite. This guy was a goblin. I'd
5. If you go to my ridiculous YouTube channel called Gimme Dem Goblins, you'll see my unboxing of blisters of old goblins. Yeah.
These are great.
And again, they have shields that come from that same Marauder sprue.
Yeah, these are awesome.
This one's my favorite, is the
I think the helmet's my favorite. I like the guy with the helmet a lot.
The standard.
The moon is really cool. I think this guy right here, the dude with the...
Forget this clown.
Oh, sorry. We got one more.
Yeah, another spearman.
I'm going to back this up so I can get a proper photo. There we go. More goblins?
More. I've got... so these are three Goblin Stickers.
Yep. They're bows and arrows. Oh, great. See, there's something about the orc range when they all kind of wore like serfs outfits, when they all had that hood.
Well, they look like peasants.
They look like peasants. Yeah, they look like the orcish peasants.
Yeah.
And the goblins tended to be the ones that were dressed like that too, unless they were like the crew for something. The orcs that didn't go up and fight, they were always like the maimed ones or whatever. They all were wearing those like peasant outfits. They're super cool. I love these. These are great. And then you picked kind of one of each monster, which I thought was cool too.
Yeah, so I did, and I wish these are, the ogre is fairly old.
Yeah, he's a just good ogre.
He's a just good ogre, so he, probably you're looking like second edition would have been when you would have first seen these ogres come out. The trolls are both fourth edition models though.
Right.
And I do...
They are the original trolls are really nice, and I have like the Morrison trolls, the ones she did like originally are really cool. But there's something about these fourth edition trolls and fifth edition trolls that are just
iconic,
incredible. Yeah. This one with the fish, the female troll with the fish, and the whatchamacallit, the club is probably one of my favorite troll miniatures of all time. I actually have that one unpainted that I want to paint at some point too. And the same with the stone trolls. I actually painted up that stone troll as my character.
You have a different stone troll.
Do I?
He has a different axe head. Slightly different body.
Oh yeah. That's right. There's two that are holding their club like that. Yeah.
5 different stone troll models.
That's right.
One that's basically just got a hand up with a rock and a club.
There's the one with the rock over his head that wouldn't fit the blister. That's hard to find.
So you can only get him from mail order for a while, which is why he's actually slightly more valuable than the rest of them, just because he wasn't available. He was only available in stores off the first batch that they ran,
and he kept popping the blister open.
Yeah, because he was too big for the blister.
Because the way the angle of the blister went, that stone basically pressed against it when it's sealed, and it would slowly come unstuck. And as soon as the troll got unstuck in his blister, that thing would just fall open. They would just fall off the rack. We used to have those all the time. And those blisters were notorious, too, for drying out.
Yeah. And I love this ogre. That's probably my favorite ogre model.
The
ogre thug, and he's perfect for my Orc and Goblin Warband because there's goblins and orcs that have the same hat as him.
His eye patch is awesome too.
Yeah, he's just he fits in perfectly with him, and I love his pose. I love that he's rearing back and he's ready to hit you with those brass knucks, as Jim Ross would say. Those damn brass knucks.
Damn brass knucks. Yeah, him and. The one that's got the Empire costume who's leaning on the Greatsword, I think he's my favorite ogre of all time. The Greatsword one. I think he's another just good one. I think he's like the Imperial Ogre or something like that.
There were the whole series of Marauder Ogres. They were all like an Imperial garb. They all had the
mercenary ogres.
What do they call it?
The ruffles.
Yeah, but they're not.
It has a name. Yeah,
it has a name.
And then for your boss, you picked an iconic miniature too.
Yeah, so I don't own a Gorfang Rock Gut. But so instead I got the boss from Lair, the Orc Lord.
Yep.
He has a different sword, but you couldn't tell unless I told you he has a different sword.
He cut it off years ago.
Yeah, cut it off years ago because he actually had a shield at one point.
Right.
The model's been reconditioned and
repainted several times.
He's been stripped, reconditioned, gave him a new sword, painted him up. And he's got 2 Black Orc bodyguards there.
That's awesome.
And that sort of forms the command group of my
little warband
goblins.
That's awesome.
So that is that.
Cool, man. Well, I mean, it's what a great payoff to that passion project. You collected the models you wanted. You went back in your storage and dug out models you liked. And there's something to be said for the satisfaction that comes from doing that. Because you've been in here's 20 models. There's 5.
Probably 10, closer to 30.
Close to 30 models.
Yeah, and there's more on my painting table at home. Right. I have another 8 or 10 goblins sitting on my painting table at home, and I have another 9 Goblin Stickers in the mail, so I have a full unit. So I can field 12. 12 is a magic number for a
goblins.
Particular game.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, 12 6s in Force. Yeah. For Saga and Age of Magic and stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, you're working on, you said, you actually mentioned you had a YouTube channel you're working on too. You decided you wanted to actually
I
do
started
some stuff.
A YouTube channel just as a joke because I made some ridiculous unboxing of me ripping open blisters to get goblins out.
Right.
And it was just a silly thing that I did to send to my friends as jokes.
Right.
But I put them on YouTube because what the hell?
Because you can host them. Because why not?
Yeah.
Well, it's fun. Because what we were talking about in the car on the way here actually is about how you get started in that kind of stuff. Because that came up as a topic. And
I'm sure people have asked you millions of times.
I'll put a bajillion times, yeah. And I honestly think it starts with something like this. You do something fun that you really enjoy and that you're passionate about, and then you just start documenting it. And I think that's the segue into what I wanted to talk about today, which is just if you try and pick something you think is going to be popular and successful, it doesn't lead to success because you're not personally passionate about it. You know what I mean? Whereas if you decide you're just really excited about something and you start documenting it, that's where doing something like making your own little YouTube channel or even anybody, you're also talking about you're going to get rid of small stuff, you're going to try and eBay some of it off. That kind of thing leads to being successful. Because if it starts off with something that you're already excited about, you have momentum internally.
Yeah,
it's
chasing passion, right? It's if you're for so long you can be excited about something and then it peters out because you don't take it to the next step,
or you don't show it to anybody.
Yeah, you're content. You're content and you're happy. And for decades, I was content and happy to just collect my little toy soldiers
and do it for you, and that's fine too. I don't want to. I don't want to imply that you should feel obligated to do that.
In fact, you shouldn't because
then it's there's a certain amount of doing something just for yourself and being immensely satisfied for it, and not having to document every fucking moment of your life that I think is really important as well.
I mean, for you, we were talking, and for you, in terms of, because obviously you do a lot of reviews, and you do a lot of Let's Plays and things like that, and that is, in and of itself, that's work. Yeah. I mean, it may not look like work when people are watching it, and they might be like, I can't believe this guy just sits around and plays games all day, and he doesn't do any fucking work, and he just sits around and plays games. It's like, no, I've seen the work that actually goes in behind the scenes, and also the pressure that you feel
to get done
to get it done, and to be accountable to the people that are essentially providing you with this stuff that's beneficial to them, because obviously there's a reason that they're providing it to you.
And I think that's I'm lucky in that regard that like one of my favorite parts of the hobby is learning new games. Like I actually, and it's funny because you and I, that was actually like the foundation of our friendship was really early on in our relationship, that you and I loved building, getting ready to play part of getting ready to play. We spent more time together probably building confrontation terrain and watching shitty ECW tapes and like talking about what we were going to do next than we necessarily did like just playing games. And for me, I think that's, it's valuable probably for me doing what I do now, that like, for instance, this week, I give you an example. We played Zone Raiders. Oh, and I played Zone Raiders. Yeah. But at the beginning of the week, I had nothing ready to play Zone Raiders. I had to figure out what terrain I needed, what models I needed, find appropriate models, build and paint them. Because I'm never just I don't want to just recycle stuff.
And you're lucky you have someone like Owen who's always willing to try stuff. Who's willing to indulge your...
Well, just like you and me though, he likes figuring out games. Yeah. And he's more cerebral on the game side of it typically. Like he likes digging into a rule set and figuring out that stuff. But that goes really well with me liking to prepare all the stuff we need to play the game, because the net result for people watching, for you guys out there, is that you get to watch a game happen. You know what I mean? Like combining forces basically results in lots of Let's Plays. And so I get to take that momentum and that fact that the prep work is part of what I enjoy, and then harness it in a direction that basically is beneficial for hopefully people watching and people that make this stuff too. And that's funny because I think that taking something like this, like whether it becomes like a career or becomes something that you're monetarily successful with, you also gain satisfaction from showing off the results of your work. And for some people that isn't important, but for you, having just like accomplished this, I know you got a kick out of afterwards posting updates on the Old Hammer channel and being able to talk to those guys and being kind of diving headfirst in that community, because it's really, they were really welcoming. First of all, it was funny because I never posted any of the stuff that we did for our nostalgia episode there, but then I got tagged in a bunch of different like No Hammer, No Hammer groups by people who were posting the video and being like, this is really cool. It kind of summed up like I think some people listened to us talk, and it kind of maybe put words to ways they were feeling about that, chasing that hobby. You know what I mean? Without having ever really spent time thinking about it, you're just doing it because you enjoy it. And I think for you, like, regardless of what you decide to do with it later on, you have this great starting off point, because if you are trying to get into something like this, making content or like producing videos, if you try and go, okay, well, my end goal isn't to be happy with what I'm making, it's to be the best and successful. Yeah. I'm going to go and look at whatever the most successful way of making a video is and try and do that and make it about the most successful topic. You're just going to make another 40K video. Exactly. You know what I mean? Like, it's just going to end up as a drop in a bucket with nobody watching it. Yeah. Whereas, who the fuck makes a YouTube channel about opening blisters of Kevin goblins?
Yeah, well, that's just it, right? Like, I mean...
that's great.
And one of the tags that I put in the video was unboxing, because that's a huge thing on YouTube.
Yeah, it is.
Is unboxing, but it's always people like unboxing like the new iPad or the new MacBook Pro or whatever.
Where were you?
They're unboxing some amazing product.
I gave you something. I remember I gave you something ages ago, and you sent me a video. It was when I was living in Memphis. This is probably 8 years ago. I sent you a blister, or gave you a blister. I think it was for Blood Bowl when you were in the Hogtown League, and you opened it, and like, I'm gonna breathe air from the 1980s.
Oh, no, that was.
And you like thought you were gonna die because you sucked it on this.
Chris Angler gave me. It was a Chaos Dreadnought.
That's right.
A Realm of Chaos Rogue Trader Chaos Dreadnought in the blister. And my buddy Alex was like, "Oh, just open it. I'll video it. It'll be funny." And so I'm like, "Oh," so I was just trying to like do like a send up of unboxing videos, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna breathe some rarefied air here." And I open it up, and I just get this like whiff of like lead dust, and I'm like, "Oh no, I've made a horrible mistake. What have I done?"
He sends me this video. He's like, "I think I'm gonna die."
Yeah, it tasted terrible.
I can only imagine what 1980s air dust tasted like. But it's funny because like I don't watch a lot of stuff on the internet, and so I'm almost insulated from that idea of like I need to chase what's popular, and I think that's protected me a little bit because there's a temptation, you know what I mean, to try and do that. And I do get sent stuff to review, of course, by today's companies as well, right? So like I do get stuff from Games Workshop, and I get stuff from Horus Valley and Privateer Press to review. And for the most part, I try and give it all equal airtime. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think one of the hardest things is that certain companies' release schedules are fucking unending. You know what I mean? For Games Workshop, like it's something
we were talking about that. It's like Games Workshop is the cacophony.
Yeah.
And then there's all these other little companies screaming out like their voices trying to add in there, and it's like there's like this drone this consistent drone, which is Games Workshop's weekly release schedule, and which we've talked about in a previous episode.
So it becomes a balancing act then for me too, because I'm really passionate about all these indie games, and so it's why typically what I'll try and do is, like, if I get in a book, I'll review it. But if I'm passionate about something, I'll review it and I'll do a Let's Play, right? Yeah. So, like, for instance, we just filmed a Let's Play for Zone Raiders because I've already seen the review for it, and because I'm really excited about trying a new game that's like that I can sink my teeth into, I get to spend extra time on it, but I have to really budget that time. You know what I mean? And because there's so much stuff coming out, there's so much new stuff, and then also balance it doing the old stuff because the White Dwarf reviews that I've been doing for the Throwback Thursday stuff has been really popular. And again, that started something I just wanted to do for myself, but then became like this. And again,
it's sort of it's created something within like our circle, like within my circle at least. Of like going back through our old miniatures and finding other people out there that have this, like passion for the old stuff. And it's not because
it's better or whatever.
No, it's arguably, it's very different. It's hand sculpted. Yeah. I mentioned to you, it feels less cynical. Mainly because I find, but that's more of the Games Workshop sort of stuff where it's like, Games Workshop stuff looks and is the way it is because that was what a team of people determined was the most marketable on-brand thing, right? Whereas if you look at some of these old works, they're just ridiculous. They just have these like silly faces. Like one of the goblins that I have, one of the goblins with a hand weapon, who's like one of my favorites. What I love about him is that the shield I gave him
is his face again.
He's Vanity Goblin because he's a goblin that basically paid to have his own face embossed on his shield.
I mean, you're not wrong.
And so he's Vanity Goblin, right?
And it feels more like there's that element of like we did this because we liked it, and let's share it with everybody. Yeah. I think that's the point I'm trying to make about getting into content creation, and where to start out from is if you can figure out a place where I'm doing this because I like it, because it's something I like and I'm passionate about. You've found the battery that's gonna keep you going to make content.
Well, especially for people who've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
And they've been in that cycle for so long. And I mean, like the release, the Warhammer release cycle, and it's like every 2 years I know I'm getting a new army book, and I'm getting new models that'll come with that army book, and up every 4 or 5 years I'm getting a new edition, and it's like to go back to sort of what the simpler times when we always look to the past with rose-colored glasses, right?
Right.
So everything that I did as a teenager and a young adult was way better than whatever I'm doing right now. Even though my life is way better than it was then.
You have more free time, more money, and more.
The idea was that back then I was
freedom.
I was so much more, and also you're young and you're wide-eyed, and so looking back at models. So even looking back at models, like the last time I came in and I brought some models that I had painted when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, well, there's, I remember painting that model.
I remember that summer. I remember playing the game.
Painting the red on his nose because he's a giant. He likes to drink, so he's got a big red nose. You know, and like I remember trying to figure out, well, how do I make his nose look red? Well, I'll take the red. And like learning because I didn't have a store to go to
figure out how to glaze. Basically, I'm gonna thin the paint.
So we're sort of just back touching on the nostalgia that we were touching on the last time, but it's
where's that battery? It's finding
for me. It's now sort of become the driving force in my hobby.
Well, that's what you said. 2010. It's gonna be the year of 2020. 2020. Sorry, it's gonna be the year of 2010. Jesus Christ.
What was I doing in 2010, man?
Fuck, where was I living in 2010? In 2020, you wanted to have it be the year of the old hammer, or the year of like chasing your passion, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's sort of what I'm doing now is sort of figuring out.
What does that look like?
What is that going to look like? What am I going to do?
Well, I want to talk about why that's important. Because, like, if you identify that thing, so, like, let's say you want to make content. It doesn't matter what the fuck it's about. It could be about rock climbing, building fucking igloos. Like, it could be anything. It doesn't matter what it is. Is once you identify that, that is so valuable. And it's valuable for three things. And this is the nickels worth of free advice that I always give people who ask me, how can I do what you've done? Because I mean, you and I are in two different spots. You're thinking about doing something, and I'm in the middle of doing something. Yeah. And the first one is when that battery, when you identify it, you got to keep it in your mind because it's the thing that's going to keep you consistent. Because if you want to be successful at this, I think one of the cornerstones of it is what's the line from Storks? Have a plan, stick to the plan, always deliver.
Yeah.
Is you have to have some kind of like consistent, communicatable, understandable plan for when you're going to release stuff or what you're going to release, right? When are you going to do what and what's it going to look like?
Well, yeah, because you want to establish that so that because people are always going to have expectations of you, right? And so if you establish it and say this is what I'm going to provide, then they can't really complain about you not meeting their expectations as long as you're doing what you've told them you're going to do.
Well, it becomes part of people's routines. If you have people watching you, very often it becomes part of their daily schedule. Like at X time of day, I watch this thing with my morning coffee, or I listen to it on my drive home or whatever. And if it's not there all of a sudden, they notice.
Yep.
It's a really big deal. I'll get messages being like, "Have you canceled this show? Have you canceled that show? Or like, when's the next whatever?" Yeah. And it's usually just like either YouTube's like scheduled it wrong, or there's a time zone shift. Like very often, one of the things is I'll get a message from someone. And it's because they're traveling, and they're like, "Did you not put a video up today?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did. I did at the same time." He's like, "Oh, I'm in Japan right now." "Oh, that's right. I'm sorry." Right. And I'll get a message and be like,
"It's 1 p.m. there. Exactly. 1 a.m. here."
A 5-hour time shift. Like he's expecting to get up with his coffee and watch a video or something like that, and he's normally in Pacific Standard or Eastern Standard or whatever. And it's just the video's just not there all of a sudden, and it's being that level of not missing a date, not missing a showtime.
Well, one of my favorite. It's about being consistent and being reliable in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
and so.
But that's work, man.
To be
that's
consistent and to be
work.
reliable, you have to be passionate.
Yeah.
Right. And so if it's not something that you're absolutely passionate about, or you don't feel that you're not committed to, it's going to be harder. It's not going to be impossible.
If you're just trying to fill a time slot with something you're not excited about, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Like you are completely fucked.
Because then it becomes a burden.
It's filler. Right? It's just filler all of a sudden. Yeah. You're making filler. You're filming a video for the sake of filming a video, and it's about nothing. Whereas there's a
lot of on YouTube. There's a lot of videos about nothing.
I'm sure there are.
Right. Hey Ash, you want to talk about the new episode of Rick and Morty?
It's just the internet. Like that's the internet. That's even fucking YouTube. That's just the internet. But like if you are constantly doing something, and this is to my point, if you're constantly doing something anyway, updating people on it isn't work, right? If you're passionate about something and you couldn't not be doing it, then having just a scheduled stop or even a scheduled break in what you're doing to kind of document it and talk about it is really easy to maintain. And that's a really key ingredient to success, is being consistent. And when you find something you're passionate about and you can't help yourself from still doing, you know what I mean? Then you're going to be able to fill that time slot. Like I couldn't not paint miniatures. I've never spent a week without painting at least one model. Exactly. And so on the paint table, which again, if I miss an episode on the paint table, I fucking hear about it. People are like, "Where's my on the paint table today?" Which to me it was people asked to see miniatures that were in battle reports. And way back in the beginning, 4 or 5 years ago, that's all that was like, sure, I'll take some close-ups of the camera and you guys can watch it. And it evolved into people got really sort of engaged in it and very interested in knowing what was coming next and what was being worked on. It kind of gave you a sneak peek into things that I was planning on doing, and then a culmination of things I was doing. And so it became a very easy piece of content for me to make. It's just updating people on what I painted this week.
Yeah. And also, I mean, you're a level 25 hero at Paint Miniature Fast. So it helps that and I'm sure that there are people out there who are just like, "I can't believe you paint so many miniatures at a time. How does he do it?" He cuts corners, kids. That's how.
That's it. I've spent 30 years cutting corners.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like I've spent 30 years knowing I have a library of 17,000 different ways to paint red.
It's funny. It's like when someone asks me, like, they'll say, "Oh, how long did it take you to paint that model?" Yeah. And I'll be like, "It took me 30 years to paint that model." Because that's how long I've been painting. Like it took me 35 years to paint that one model. Because that's how long it took me.
That's just pretentious enough.
Oh, I know. But that's where I am, man. That's my core.
Just pretentious.
It's not pretentious. It's arrogance.
That's fair enough. But you're completely right. Is that I think the thing that makes me paint fast.
Also because I have no idea how long it takes me to paint a miniature.
I've literally watched your brain turn off while you're painting miniatures, and you just go into the zone while you're painting. Yeah. And I can be talking, you won't hear a fucking word I say. But that whole cutting corners thing. I think it's actually less about cutting corners, more about cutting out the hesitation that people take when they're painting.
Yeah, well,
that like paralysis of like, what color should I do next, or what color am I gonna do? Like I just go into autopilot and I start painting. Yeah. It's that thing when the last time you were on, and I was like, oh, I really like the metal on those. How did you wash it? And you're like, well, I fucking know. I mixed some stuff together and made a wash.
Right. Grab some random things like, well, what colors those go? Those are red caps. Okay, those go into the dip. And,
yeah. Some dark tones, some of this, some of that. Let's just throw this wash down and we'll see how it looks.
And it'll be different for every model, which when you're painting orcs is fine because they're not getting their pig iron from the same smelter, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're just wherever they've picked it up along the way.
But I think that's what comes through repetition and practice, and that's why I paint faster. Is that I don't have to think about what I'm doing as much as most people do, especially when you're first starting off. You're terrified of messing up.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And that's through having done it for so long. I think for both of us, that's something that's just gone away.
Well, you've always
stick in,
even back in the day in the early 2000s. When we first sort of met up, you were always efficient and fast at painting, and I wasn't. It wasn't.
I'd finish.
I don't know if you rubbed off on me in that way.
I think it's both.
Because I think we rubbed off on each other in a lot of in terms of a lot of like.
You taught me to slow down. I taught you to speed up.
But like and I guess it's not cutting corners. It's more about just efficiencies and realizing that I don't need to do 6 layers of highlight on that because 3 is gonna
being happy with the result too.
People are gonna be able to. You're gonna get the same thing from 3. I don't need to blend.
No one's gonna know what's under there
when I can just glaze it, and I'll get the same effect with a glaze as I would from blending up the.
It's funny, my buddy Clarence, he used to paint every miniature disassembled and then glue it together.
Yeah,
and I was like, when Clarence first. He worked for me at the Fairview Games Workshop store, probably in 2003. I watched him do this on demo figures, and I was like, what the fuck are you doing? And he's like, I'm painting the miniature. I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. I'm like, you're painting pieces of miniature. What, are you going to paint the meat and the bone inside each arm, too? And he's like, And it was like, you teaching me.
I can just so see Clarence's reaction to that.
just like paralyzed. Yeah, as I'm staring at him, I'm just furious watching him paint like an orc boar boy. Yeah. Like 17 hours to paint this one boar boy. And what was like when you showed me washing, and I'm like, who the fuck does
and
this?
Why would you highlight up from black when you can just put your base coat on, throw a wash on, and then throw your base coat back on?
And I watched this break.
And you're literally like 6 layers into what you were doing before.
Well, now Clarence can paint an army as fast as I can. Clarence is amazing at getting armies done.
So I think going back to what you're talking about, you're on the painting table stuff, and why you were also mentioning to me that your sort of your Let's Paint and your hobby focused videos are some of your most engaged videos.
Yeah, they are.
And
for sure.
It's because I think people don't have a mentor that's going to guide them through the things like that. They have their peer group, or they have a Games Workshop store, or their local hobby store.
They're definitely looking for online today.
On Monday, I went into Lords of War with Alex. We drove by and we stopped in there to see Chris, and I'd never seen the store before because I was out in Oakville and I live downtown.
It's great, isn't it? The amount of hobby stuff in there.
And it's something I mentioned to him. I said, I think what's great is that you've established yourself as the painter's store.
Yeah.
You carry fantastic paintbrushes. Your cabinets are filled with your models. Chris is a phenomenal painter.
Yeah.
John Ho's models, John
Ho, that kid was 14.
John Ho is probably the best miniature painter I've ever met.
I think he's probably the best painter.
Probably one of the. I would say. He did a Robot Gilman, the Forge World one, and Alex and I were looking at it, and I was like, he painted like damage and battle wear into the blue checker pattern and the fade, and I'm just like, okay.
He's just a phenomenal artist, though.
But
he's a professional artist,
store, and seeing that in the cabinet can be both exhilarating and intimidating.
Yeah, for sure.
But something that about Lords of War, and then just to plug their store because I thought it was great, was their hobby stuff is phenomenal.
Well, just the supplies they have,
and they'll sell you an airbrush, and then they'll show you how to use the airbrush. Yeah. And that's one thing that
It's so funny because he was on 2 weeks ago and talking about this stuff in our Black Friday episode, and now you're just repeating all the things that he said. You haven't even watched the episode, have you?
No, I didn't. I saw Black Friday, and I was like, this is not relevant to my interests.
It's funny. It's just funny because he literally talked about some of that stuff, but what he thought was important to the gaming store, and you're literally just
and that was literally from like what I've talked to you about this game store and walking in there and just walking around the store and then buying 3 paintbrushes.
Well, and I think right there you see that's what those guys are passionate about.
Yeah.
And that's what that imprints on what you do.
Yeah.
So whether it's creating a business, making content, whatever, you can see that this is what we personally care about, and how can that translate into being successful?
And when we were in there were 2 guys that came in, and they weren't there to play; they were there to paint.
Yep. Them in. They went down to the basement to go paint nights,
and I'm just like,
where am I right now?
But it's one of those things where it's like you can tell that the reason that people are passionate about that is because they walk in and they see those models, and it's that rising tide lifts all ships, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you've got one of the owners who are phenomenal hobbyists, you've got a guy like John Ho who can just put his miniatures in the cabinet and people their eyes just bug out. Because they see that potential, and then you look, because they have, it's not just the gaming miniatures, they have those busts.
Oh yeah, they have everything.
And stuff, and the way that they're painted, I don't paint that good,
I could have you slowed down.
I could have slowed down, and again, if it was something I was passionate about,
but
I'm not passionate about painting a bust
and finding
of a model. I'm passionate about painting a game piece because I want to use that piece to tell a story.
Yep, absolutely.
Right?
And that's, to me, I think that's a really key thing, is that one, it keeps you going. 2, it keeps you consistent. And then for me, the third thing is it keeps you creative, and you'll make something no one else is making if it's something that you're excited about. And for instance, I think that's just using Lords of War's reference again. There is no other gaming store in Toronto that caters to painters the way they do. It's like walking into an art supply store.
No, yeah, exactly.
They have the new, is Scale 75 or Vallejo that's doing the tube paints.
It was Scale 75.
Scale 75. Yeah. They're doing like actual tube paints.
They're like artists, they look like oils, but they're acrylic.
They're crazy. And then you can just put them out like toothpaste basically. You can water them down forever, and when you basically take a paintbrush and wipe it, there's no streaks. It's just perfect. It's like using a marker.
Because it's probably
very well ground.
I don't know. Yeah,
it's got a great medium in it. Good consistency.
The pigment in it is probably.
But to try and find that anywhere else in Southern Ontario would be impossible.
No, you have to order it from somewhere.
They have a unique business now in the area and are offering a unique experience. Like you can't walk into a gaming store and have that same experience.
For sure.
And it would be the same with giving them goblins. You know what I mean? Like that the idea that you're making something no one else is making is going to be because it's something you're personally excited about. And if it comes from inside, it's very unlikely that other people are going to be making it the same way. I mean, lots of people make battle reports, right? Lots of people do what I do, like, functionally, but I don't think anybody makes them the way I do necessarily, because they can't be me, and they can't be excited about the things I'm excited about. And same with the podcast. Like, no one's currently making a gaming podcast, I think, exactly like ours.
Or it's just like a round table of just shooting the shit.
Yeah, shooting shit about the industry and about like what we're doing in the industry, and more like metaphysical stuff. But it's because that's what you and I would be talking about in the fucking car anyway. You know what I mean? Like literally, we'd be having this conversation probably over a beer or sitting at a coffee shop or something like that. I think we started this conversation at the coffee shop this time. But it's because it's what we're personally passionate about. Like I'm very interested in finding out why people are excited about stuff and why the industry leans certain ways. And so talking about it comes naturally because I find that fascinating. Like, this is a very weird fucking industry. It started off...
It's such a niche thing that's sort of grown out of... Well, it's grown out of old men playing with tin soldiers.
Yeah.
And,
then having in-jokes with each other. Like, if you think about Warhammer 40,000, it started off as a big science fiction in-joke.
Yeah.
If you read through Rogue Trader, it's Inquisitor Obi-Wan Clouseau, who's like, so what do you got there? Let's just unpack those references for a second. You have the Spanish Inquisition, you have Star Wars, and you have a French detective novel.
Yeah, exactly.
So those are 3 references. Inquisitor Obi-Wan Clouseau. Like, unpacking just the idea that was suddenly going to turn into an IP that's worth hundreds of millions of pounds is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But that's where we are. And so I think that examining that sort of like process and stuff is really interesting. I think that what's really interesting about it is that it's mostly lost at this point. The oral tradition, like the people who were there, they're in their 60s now.
Well, that's
like, it's to get the real story is becoming increasingly difficult because the people that were actually there aren't in the industry anymore. They're retired, probably.
In sort of my research for this old Hammer stuff that I'm doing, I've been going through really old Citadel journals from the mid 80s. And like opening it up, and there's pictures of those original studio guys, right?
Right.
There's a picture of Ali Morrison and Jess Goodwin, and they just look like a couple of punk rockers.
Yeah, man.
Right, and with their sunglasses on, and they're too cool for school, and it's just like. And when I mentioned in the last podcast, I was like, it's like that punk rock thing, and it's like it really was early '80s Britain at that time.
Trish Morrison,
you're dealing with like Thatcherite Britain, and if you look at the creative content that came out of England at that time in terms,
all counterculture,
70s and 80s, even 60s, going back like
the mods and the
you look at Michael Moorcock, and you've got Hawkwind, and you've got. All this genre stuff that's coming out of there. You've got Doctor Who
Dark Side of the Moon.
At its height of popularity with Tom Baker and stuff, and it's like all that coming out. And I'm reading through these magazines, and I'm like, I wasn't there, but I can really feel it. But I can feel it because I can remember being, 13, 14 years old.
And this is what was cool.
And reading a White Dwarf magazine, and imagining, I would love to go to England. I'd love to go to a Games Workshop, because we didn't have Games Workshops in North America at that point. I think there was one store in Baltimore. It
was in Columbia, Maryland. Maryland was the first big one.
So maybe that store was open at that time, but, so as me as a young, wide-eyed child, or a young teenager, dreaming about this stuff and getting my hands on these models and not knowing what I'm doing with them, and having no idea what any of it really means, and then having these like monthly tomes of knowledge that I can go through. Like I was mentioning to you when we were looking at the old White Dwarfs, I was like, I remember the first White Dwarf I ever bought was issue 104, and that was the red issue with the Harlequins on the cover, and I bought that because I had the Harlequins.
Yep.
And it was like, that's fantastic, and that was sort of the start of 40K for me. I painted Ratham and Ralpartha and Citadel before, but I didn't know what Warhammer was until really that point. So
it's funny because I think that's a thing that like if you're really excited about something, especially now, like talking about the culture and talking about where it's come from, where it's gone, we have to kind of acknowledge the fact that it started off as a thing that was the other. It was very different. And I think that what we're seeing now is it's kind of coming full circle, where now it's a bit more normalized and mainstream. You talk about that like that on brand product making stuff.
Well, they're a big company, so they have big company problems, right?
And they're public, so it's like that's a thing, right? It's the difference Star Wars than in Star Wars now, right?
They have to provide growth and returns to their investors.
Yeah, I saw this great meme the other day, and it was Dr. Manhattan. It was that scene in Dr. Manhattan. It's 1983. I'm being blah blah. It's 1975, or sorry, 1983, and I'm watching the last Star Wars movie ever. It's 2005. I'm watching the last Star Wars movie ever. It's 2019. I'm watching the last Star Wars movie ever. And it's that idea that over time you're gonna you experience these things, but you experience them over and over again, kind of in new ways.
And other people will go through it at different times. Like other people that come into the hobby later will then go through their own version of that, and it'll be different. And it'll be their experience, right?
Yeah. And they're going to be passionate with different things.
It could be walking into a Games Workshop store and seeing a Space Marine on the table and being like, "That's the most coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
How do I get more of those?"
And following that level of passion.
Or I think getting introduced to Dungeons and Dragons by a friend, and then going to a hobby store to buy a D&D book and seeing a wall full of Dungeons and Dragons miniatures and being like, "I can have a three-dimensional tactile representation of my character."
I think we're actually, it's funny because I think that you and I maybe can't even perceive what that's going to look like.
No.
And that we're on the edge of a wave coming in right now.
Is that wave going to be where you just pick up your tablet and see
something
and hit a button?
No. There's going to be a new generation of hobbyists probably that we start to see coming off Warhammer Total War. Warhammer Total War is one of the most
pretty big.
It's one of the most successful video games. It's always, whenever an expansion comes out, it bumps up on Steam to like the top 10.
One of the interesting things I'm watching is there's a guy on YouTube who's producing historical videos where he's basically going through the history
refighting it in Total War,
and he's using Total War to basically do like machinimas for these things. I can't remember what the guy's channel is, but they're really cool, really interesting.
Well, and I think what's going to happen is, I'm this is me prognosticating, but if the Warhammer the Old World ties, and then Tony Cottrell's saying it's going to look like Warhammer Total War, then yes, there's clearly there's a brand goal here to try and bring those people.
The Warhammer the Old World, whatever that's going to be.
I think that there's probably a big selection of people who are aware of the brand right now and playing the video games who might have their first tabletop experience when that starts.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Like when a new Warhammer Total War expansion drops, but there's advertising for the old world in there, as opposed to vice versa, where a new Warhammer thing drops, there's advertising for Total War in it. It's going to go the other way. It's going to start drawing people in from other hobbies and other sort of like fandoms into this tabletop one. And I think the problem is that you and I can't perceive that the way a younger generation can, because we're not as neck deep in the digital culture as we are in the tabletop culture. So like that's where I'm like really interested in analyzing it, because I think there's going to be passion coming in from outside that we haven't even really seen yet. Same with like just digital design. There are people out there right now digitally, like these digital designers, you know, outcast from the video game industry or just the overpopulation of the video game industry, that are sculpting for tabletop companies.
Yeah.
And that's having them discover tabletop companies.
I mean, how many years has it been that we've really had decent models in board games?
Oh,
and like, now I do not like board game models, but I can recognize that
the quality is
there's a
way
quality
higher
in there.
Yeah.
You know, we've come a long way from cardboard standees.
Well, when you think about it,
or just meeples.
Yeah,
you know?
It's crossed over now, right?
Yeah.
Like you were just looking at my human interface, Be a Better Human miniatures that I'm using for Zone Raiders, but the same exact company that would print those is also printing all the Song of Ice and Fire miniatures, which are great miniatures. Like just from like a painting point of view, they're fantastic, and they're the leading edge of what board game, you know, printing can do as far as making miniatures. And that, to me, that's that stuff where, like, because I think you and I came from a place where this was being done very specifically for this industry, by hand, spin cast, all that stuff, we don't see these external things that are starting to like broaden the market, but also bring passion from other places into this.
It's like I would never consider those miniature games, right?
And they are.
The closest one I would consider a miniature game is Song of Ice and Fire, because it's played on a tabletop. It's not played on a game board, but it still has a lot of. You see the mechanics cross over, right?
It's being printed like a board game.
And
when you open the box, it has cardboard components, plastic components, and it's packaged like a board game. If you open a copy of Zombicide or a copy of Song of Ice and Fire, it was produced in the same factory using the same processes, and they're functionally no different.
Yep.
But mentally, we think of one as being a miniature game, and the other one as being a board game.
Well, it's also a question of accessibility, right? Like, I mean, the key now to good, solid game design is accessibility. Is you want to be able to open it up with a table with 4 people standing around it, and all 4 of those people can quickly grasp the game and play it, right?
Yeah.
Warhammer didn't really do that till probably 7th or 8th edition in terms of making a game accessible to a very general audience.
Well, I'd say actually
maybe 6th edition.
I would say
make an argument for 6th edition.
I'd say until Age of Sigmar. Like, I'll be honest, the blood price has been so high in every edition of Warhammer until Age of Sigmar, and easy to build and snap fit models. It's only in the last 5 years, I think, that they've actually cracked that idea that like these aren't just they're not just for this market. Shadespire is a good example of that. Yeah. It's just punch and play. You know what I mean? Like Warcry is a good example of that, because you don't need anything outside the box. Like the box is a complete game system in one go. And I think that up until that point, there was still this conceit of like, it has to be hard. You have to earn the game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which you can tell because like I've been rereading my 3rd edition rule book.
Right.
And oh man, does that game make you work for it?
That's it. And you had to be passionate.
But it also explains to me how saving throws work 3 different times. Right? So there's an efficiency that I guess they've learned in games design over the years, because I don't need to know how to calculate saving throws in shooting and in close combat and for movement, because remember your saving throw or your armor or whatever, it affects it, like, you know, because your heavy armor and shield, guess what, you're only moving 3 inches now.
That's right, you might as well move.
So but it's all those little things, and you can see like how over the years GW chipped away at what was a really complex system. And I'm sure that there are other systems that were probably precursors to Warhammer that were really complex, because they were probably made by you know, guys who were mathematicians.
Kriegspiel is pretty damn complicated.
So I can remember years ago when I was a kid. This is a funny story, because I was at the Silver Snail, and this guy invited me over to his place to play miniature games in his basement. And I didn't think anything out of it at the time, because I'm like 12 years old. And I'm like, sure, I'll come over to your house and play miniature games. I have no stranger danger awareness up right now, because I just want to play miniature games.
That's right.
I go over to his house. It turns out he's a really nice guy. He's got a wife and a kid, and In his basement, he has a naval combat game.
Crazy.
That was actually designed by the U.S. Navy. Doesn't use dice. It's all charts and graphs.
Right.
And you're literally pushing around little ships with sticks because you need your entire basement floor to play this game.
Oh, my God. Wow.
And he played the game with me, and then he touched me. No, and then I left. And I don't know what that game was. Right. I don't know. I don't think I ever saw that guy again.
Yeah.
It was one of those weird experiences that's just like in the back of my head that I can barely remember. But it was so strange and foreign to me at the time that there were people that had this sort of stuff in their lives.
Yeah. Well, it was something that was like not common because your typical hobbies. I mean, they didn't involve that level of engagement, and it was almost, I don't say it was a gatekeeping, but it was almost like a point of pride when you finished that army or completed that game that you got through it. You know what I mean?
Well,
you had to be passionate.
I know for me there was definitely a level of gatekeeping. And there was a level of gatekeeping probably right up until the point where Games Workshop started to allow unpainted models in their store. Yeah. That was a huge gate.
Yeah, it was absolutely.
You need a fully painted army to come and play in the store.
And
you want to play with unpainted models, you can play at home all you want, but you're not coming to the store with unpainted models.
And it certainly did result in a sort of, I would say, community that felt passionate that they had accomplished something. Like you did get diehard fans that way. Because you'd basically
But there were always those two tiers of guys, right?
Right.
There were the guys who painted their armies.
And the guys who didn't.
And the guys who didn't. And you always wanted to be with the guys who painted their armies because they were far more interesting guys.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if it was they were far more interesting. It's that you'd all been through something the same, right? Like that level of commitment, that level of like you've completed a project.
We're not fighting a war here.
Even playing a big game.
I was in the trenches with him.
That's all.
And I got finally got my last guy painted.
But when you're 16 and you've painted 300 miniatures, that might be the most work you've ever done on a single project in your life, right? Like that's actually a pretty big hurdle.
Project building, and the discipline it takes to finish something like that are definitely beneficial life skills.
Yeah, and that's my
being
last.
Being able to commit and to finish and to.
That's my last bit about this. Is if you're gonna make content and you're gonna make polished content, make it fucking polished.
Yeah.
Like don't think that the showing off of how much stuff you have is the thing that actually makes your content.
I've seen those tapes.
It's more.
This is my 30,000 points of Tyranids laid out on my kitchen table. That's great, man.
If you're trying to create an experience, it should be a polished experience. It should be as polished as you can make it.
Yeah.
And that isn't to say it needs to be like a professional level. It needs to be something that's like perfectly done. But it does need to be something that's as done as you can make it before you start. If you find yourself thinking, oh, that's good enough, you know what I mean? That's not done, but that's okay. People won't notice. Then you're off. You're a little bit off track.
You're talking about, man. That's
you're a little bit off track.
50% of all the models I paint are, it's good enough, no one will notice.
Remember when I would brag on Nico about not basing his miniatures? Yeah. I'd always be like, you're so close to being done. And then Nico would just like on purpose not base his miniatures around me, like drive me crazy. Because it's that level of like, you haven't quite crossed the finish line, and if you're making content, people do notice that. People notice. People will choose to see something completed versus something half done 9 times out of 10, because it's not about here's the thing I'm trying to do. It's about showing off the result, the thing you've accomplished. So I would highly recommend that when you're trying to show something off, get it as complete as you can. Before you show it off. And that means like if you're gonna, I don't know, run a D&D campaign and you've got most of the models finished but 6 of them aren't painted, then find 6 painted models to sub in for those unpainted models. Like change the story, like MacGuffin it or change the story or whatever. So the parts that you do include are done. You know what I mean? That you don't run out of time and say, it's good enough. Because like sometimes you will have a time crunch or have like a crunch of like I need to get something finished for whatever. But then you're not quite there and it's time to go. And it's better to change the story or change the plot or include something finished than it is to include something half done. Because half done always looks half done.
Yeah.
A different storyline is just a different storyline, right? Making a creative like left turn or right turn is more different than compromising basically on the finished product. And that's my last thing that I think passion helps drive you through. Because if you're passionate about something, you're not as susceptible to making those compromises and being like,
it's also about wanting to make it the best you can make it, right? And wanting it to make, and wanting to make it an example of the best that you're capable of.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what whenever I start a new army project, that's always in the back of my head is this army is going to be the best example of what I can make this army. And that's what I did with my new Space Marines. That's what I did with my Age of Sigmar armies. Was I said, I've built an Orc and Goblin army. I built 4 Orc and Goblin armies over
in your life.
Additions, right? Just in terms of adding on or replacing models and things like that. So I've gone back and I've been in doing that project mode for Orcs and Goblins so many times.
Right.
So when it came to do the Iron Jaws, it was like, okay, I've got to make this the best example of Orcs that I can make them. And then when I did my Gloomspite Gits, it was, I've got to make this the best example of Goblins that I can do. And now I'm totally done with that plastic garbage and I'm back to 30-year-old metal.
But it's funny, though, because that's trying to find just the right base. Like, that's something you've always done, trying to find just the right accessory. Or just those shields you found for those orcs. You know what I mean? Like, that's a little thing that you found, those old Marauder shields, but that's to you couldn't have done it a different way.
No,
you know
because
what I mean?
my hobby OCD, I would be upset. I actually had different shields on them. I had the regular round shields, and I just painted them red in the middle as just like a placeholder, and I was like, you know what, I'll find decals, because I'm terrible at freehand, but I'll find some decals, or I'll do something to them eventually. And then I found those Marauder shields, and I was like, okay, well, now those can be the only thing that will work there.
Right. Yeah, we've set a new bar, basically.
That's my hobby OCD.
I do think that's a byproduct of that old philosophy, you know, that like you don't play with unpainted models, like all that stuff. I do think that we inherit a little bit of that from that, you know what I mean? Like, and I do think that was probably the intention. I do think that got off track a little bit with the whole like keeping people from playing in your stores and all that stuff. But I do think there was a pure intention there of show off things the best you can, because you learn a lesson from that. Well, I don't think it was ever implemented perfectly, but I do think that passing on of like,
no, but we never know what the side effects of something like that are going to be. Like not allowing people to play games in your store with unpainted models
turned away people
and probably lost customers
for sure, 100%.
Right. So from a business standpoint, it certainly makes a lot more sense to bring those people in and to welcome them.
But on the other side, you've got that idea that the people that did get past that last hurdle, they became like lifelong customers. You know, exactly. Like the ones that accomplished something. So but
you need those people to set the example for the other people.
And I think there's some, like with everything in life, somewhere in the middle, there's a compromise that is actually probably the healthiest way to do it. And it's going to be horses for courses and different for everybody. Yep. But the idea that you've not compromised basically on finishing something, I think it's just that's a valuable life lesson. And when you're 14,
of course,
you know what I mean? That's what makes you passionate about getting things right in the future. Like that's how you get good at school. Like if you're going to grow up to be a doctor, it's not like, his heart's okay. You know, I mostly stitched that up. We'll be fine. Like I mostly got that guy's kidney out. And I got all those bullet fragments out. I think I got most of them.
The sort of the old man in me sort of says that's where we're heading, is that we're heading to that. Remember that episode of The Simpsons where it was like, be like the boy, do what you want to do.
That's right. Thing? Yeah.
And then nothing got done, and society eventually broke down.
That's right.
Because no one was taking the responsibility.
It was do what you feel day. Remember this do what you feel day? Do what you feel.
and so I kind of feel like, and this is I guess cultural criticism now, but like. You feel like we're getting to there? People are like don't tell me how to do my job because you're gonna hurt my feelings.
Yeah. There's a certain level of do what you feel, but like that idea of like you don't compromise until you get it right. You know, measure twice, cut once, sort of like mentality that gets drilled into you. I think there's something valuable in that, and especially if you're gonna take something and make it and put it in front of the world. You got to make sure you get that the best you possibly can. It's never going to be perfect. Like nothing's ever perfect. I don't care how much you try. Having like self-edited books now, I know that like no matter what I do, something's gonna get fucked up.
And believe me, I can look at my models that I painted, and I can see where like there's
something you want to finish.
Yeah,
you missed.
I'm like,
that guy's fingernail didn't get painted. Oh no!
Like, wait a second, I didn't finish highlighting that guy's teeth.
Yeah, exactly. There's one shade of beige higher than I should have gone on that. Yeah. And it's only ever going to really stick out to you. But I think there's a level that's healthy, especially when you're going to put things in front of people. And you're gonna get abuse. Like that's life. People are gonna also criticize or say things about what you make, no matter what. But if you know you made your best effort to double and triple and quadruple check, or to get it the best you possibly could, then it's way easier to go, I missed that, I'm not going to miss that again, and then the next thing you make.
And there's value in all criticism, even hideous, negative, trolly criticism. There's value in it because you can always be like, okay, well, that's a bad example of criticism, and now I know what that looks like.
Yeah.
Right?
I used to call it seagull criticism, where people just fly in, shit on everything in the game.
Exactly.
And they never respond afterwards. If you try to like ask them follow-up questions, it's just fucking gone. Seagull criticism is my favorite kind of criticisms because it's literally the people that just wanted to make someone feel bad for the day to make themselves feel good. And it's like, I can just ignore that. That's fine. Or it's valid. Just be like, they're right. I'll change that next time. You know what I mean? Maybe they won't come and shit on whatever I do next. It'll attract less seagulls. I'll throw out less French fries. I get less seagulls. And I think there's that like, again, that like level of passion. If you're passionate about something, will also push you through getting it wrong, because you're gonna get it wrong. You're gonna fuck stuff up.
And ultimately, what you're doing by putting it out there is you're just sharing that enthusiasm. And enthusiasm and passion is contagious.
Yeah, it is.
So, and I think that's why you've been successful at this, is because your enthusiasm and your passion is contagious, and there are people out there who don't have a tight circle of hobby, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That they don't have people that they can rely on. I think Southern Ontario, and I sort of include like the Golden Horseshoe with Toronto, Hamilton, Southern Ontario, is so rife with people that do this hobby and do it really well and do it to the best of their ability. I don't know if there's places like that. I mean, there obviously are, but I think that there's something kind of about this space, and I don't know if it's because we're a colony and we've sort of grown up with that British colonialism, that sort of like that British culture is rubbed off on us, because this is a very, very British hobby.
It is, for
right?
sure.
Like, even just reading those old books and the British humor and the old white dwarfs, I'm reading the gobbledygook cartoons, and I'm just reading this, and I'm just like, this is complete and utter nonsense.
Yeah,
but if I was a Brit, if I was a Southern British person reading this in 1982, I'd get a great laugh at it. I'd understand it, but.
And well, I think that's I don't know if that's, I don't know what it is about this area. We have had, I think, access to wargaming for longer than a lot of places, because we had Ratham in Brantford, which is relatively close, and Ratham was a caster for Games Workshop for a long time. And actually, if you look at some of these early White Dwarfs, Ratham's mentioned as a partner. Yeah, it's Ratham, Ralpartha, and Citadel are the three partners that are casting stuff, and it's being sold through Games Workshop stores. And then one of the very earliest Games Workshop stores is the Games Workshop store on Queen Street.
Yeah,
it's a very early.
So Toronto and Vancouver UK. Both got Games Workshop stores relatively the same time. I think the Toronto store was. Gastown
was a few years. No, Gastown was a few years later. Well, that's why it's actually Games Workshop Canada was always called Games Workshop Queen Street Limited.
Oh, right.
Because it was incorporated as Games Workshop Queen Street.
But I mean, I remember the day that store opened. I was there. I remember hearing about that store opening because Workshop had actually poached staff from Silver Snail
to come work there
to go and open the store for them. And that was, to me, because there was no Games Workshop and I had only ever seen Games Workshop
deal.
In the White Dwarf magazine. I'd only ever seen. I couldn't believe that Toronto's getting a Games Workshop.
Yeah, that's huge news.
And it was a massive paradigm shift in terms of my hobby and probably everyone's hobby around.
As far as bringing wargaming into this area, because it happened so early on, mid 80s, and it was here for so long, I think that's why we see there's a fairly robust selection of gaming stores that you can go to in this area. There's tons of them, and they all offer different stuff.
Well, that's what I mean. So like this like Golden Horseshoe part of Southern Ontario, because you're here, there's a bunch of other guys, a bunch of commission painters, a bunch of talented people. You got the mini wargamings here, like all what's his name, Chris with the brush.
Crystal Brush? Sword and Brush?
No.
Okay.
Never mind.
Brush something? Brush Service? Brushworks? Brush.
Your buddy that was here.
Oh, Chris. Oh, Way the Brush.
Way the Brush. You're going to have to edit all that brain farting out. Where I'm just like staring at you going, just say it, Ash. Just say it, because I can't say it, because I don't know.
Bro, there's like 7 different brush names.
Well, that's just it, right? Is it so you've got so many talented people,
at your
and that's another thing is that this isn't something that you could have done alone.
Oh no, for sure.
Right?
Like,
and the fact that you've got Owen.
Yeah.
And the fact that you've got, other guys who you can call on
reliably
to come in and play these games with you. The fact that you've got me, and I'm so important.
You are very important in this whole process. I couldn't have done it without you.
Yeah.
Just so you guys know, this is the power behind the throne right here.
That's right. I believe the term is Svengali.
Svengali.
I was your Svengali back in the day.
It's true, you were.
Yeah.
I think that's just a how long it's been here thing. It's the same reason why you have tons of talented people doing the same kind of thing, content creating in the UK, is because it as far as like a culture goes, the tabletop culture in the UK is it's almost like the cradle of civilization.
There are creative hotbeds everywhere. Like there's guys out in Seattle, out in the West Coast,
and Russia now too. Incredibly talented people.
So I'm sure that there's people that are watching this who are like, "Damn you! You
didn't mention us.
Your community's not like our community. We have the best people in the world doing this." Like even like Montreal, like
and two incredibly talented painters there.
But, and again, and that's people playing in a whole different language and a whole different culture. I don't know, people outside of Canada don't really understand the sort of the two solitudes between the French and the English here, but like it's very...
Well, they didn't cross over until recently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like those gaming wise didn't cross over until fairly recently. I think that's the thing where you're right though. I think
but it's like a whole other community that has its own...
I think since the advent of the internet, that's brought these disparate communities together and allowed them all to grow exponentially, right? It's because now if you are in one of these like sort of far-flung gaming communities where you don't have a lot of access to this kind of thing, you do have 24-hour access to it online.
Yeah, well, the internet was definitely probably the biggest tipping point.
That's where those, you talk about that mentorship thing, people finding out like painting ideas or being able to just hang out with people and paint. Like my friend Mike Cousins, Epic Doug Mike, he has a Twitch stream now, and I think 6 months ago he had maybe 10 people watching. He was excited about it, and 100 people following him. And now he's got like 150 people watching whenever he does a stream, and like a couple thousand people following him. And like that's people who are literally excited about miniature painting and just want to hang out and chat with like-minded people. And so he does this comics, he's the comic style painting and all that stuff. And he's carved out a niche of people who just want to they want to be able to talk to someone who's great at painting, hang out, have a chat, and learn some techniques and stuff. And that's what we used to get going to a gaming store, right? You had to go either hang out with your friends who knew what this stuff was, or go to a gaming store to meet strangers, you know what I mean, and go play a boat game in a basement.
Yeah, exactly.
about this kind of thing.
And not get disappeared.
I
lived to tell about it.
And pre-Amber Alerts, you were probably going to be an A&E special otherwise. And I think that's a really interesting thing. And I think that's where part of over time, I don't know what the future's going to look like. And I'm not worried about it because passionate people are going to be passionate about it.
But again, it's not for us, right? Like you don't really have to worry about it because it's for our kids.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm excited to think about it because I want to see. It's funny, we were talking about this over lunch. Actually, is including our kids in this. I won't be able to. At some point, Cash is going to end up in videos because I won't. If he gets a driver's license, I won't be able to keep him out of here. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
He's going to have all the same things. He'll lapse in and out probably. But seeing the visceral reaction he's had to this stuff and the way his imagination works, he's going to end up in videos. Cat probably end up in videos too. Over time, because they're just they have an interest, and even though I'm not trying to make it happen, it's going to happen regardless.
Ayanna and I paint together, sort of regularly. I want to paint more with her. Yeah, obviously Ayanna's my daughter.
Yep.
And so that's sort of one of the things that I was saying. It was like, well, what if I did like painting for kids, and like how do you introduce
kids to painting?
A 7-year-old, a sub 10-year-old,
to miniature painting.
Because,
I had to give Cash an actual date.
Because I have some like I painted with her when she was very young, and it was just her just like mashing a brush into the side of a miniature. And me being very frustrated. What are you doing? Don't leave the brush in the paint.
Well, that's what I'm interested in. I want to see what they end up being passionate about, because I don't really know. The way I conceptualize what Cash is excited about in my head is through my lens. And so what I'm really excited to find out in the future, and I think this is going to be telling for the industry as a whole, is where does it go and how does it integrate their interests and make them passionate in doing something and just engage them? Because like we get engaged through building, painting, and playing games and writing and whatever other parts of the hobby our creative mind kind of like channels into. I have no idea what that's going to look like for our kids. Because, like, it could be through coding. It could be through, like, some kind of, like,
Minecraft?
Virtual AI process. Yeah, like, we have no idea what it's going to look like. We might be able to, in 10 years, play, you know, almost like teleconference style through some type of 3D mapping, right? Where I can sit here in the studio and a 3D mapping device is just going to scan the table, scan my army, and somewhere in Poland can play a game with me.
Oh, for
sure. I mean, telepresent, basically. Like, that's an entirely possible future that my kids may enjoy someday, where they get to not just show off their collections physically to people across from them, but digitally across the world. So, like, I think that's where, like, I'm passionate about this industry, just to kind of bring it full circle, is that this is an industry that's always changing and always innovating and always trying to be a little bit punk rock, because that's what its roots are. And I have no idea what my hobby experience translates to for my kids. And it could be something totally different from what we're doing. It might not involve painting miniatures. It might not involve...
It might involve just, like, virtual 3D sculpting.
Well, imagine they're just creating. They got the power gloves, and they're like physically. Yeah, but they're like so physically. Because it's so bad. It's the power glove. but they're physically painting. You know what I mean? Digitally, like that's a thing that we might experience in our lifetimes. And so
I think there'll always be a place for tactile, physical product
for us, for sure. Right? For us, for sure.
Something. Well, I mean, until we're all living in the Matrix.
You're presupposing we don't live in the Matrix now. Oh, Info Warhammer's coming 2020.
I've seen the documents. They keep handing me this stuff about rat men. No rat men.
Info Warhammers. But you're right. Like I think for the Luddite, there will always be like an element of that like traditionalism that's going to be popular. But we. So
do you feel a responsibility that you have to keep it alive?
I think it's a yes and no.
And do you think it's our generation's responsibility to keep it alive? Or do you think that...
Well, we're the middle children, though, right?
Do you think that the generation after us is going to be the ones who are responsible for keeping this alive?
I don't know, because like, literally, you and I are the middle children of this. We're not in our 60s, so we're not the people that created it. You know what I mean? We're the ones who were the initial customers, the people
We're the ones that the guy was basically being like, hey, come back to my house and play miniatures with me.
And he's in his 60s now. Yeah. But, like, the funny thing is that I do feel a sense of responsibility of not necessarily telling people that the way that I came through the hobby or the way I do the hobby is the right thing to do, but definitely for just telling the whole story. You know, like in Beyond Thunderdome, doing the tell of us all.
It's my turn to do the tell.
To do the tell, that's right. I do think that there's a level of like, you have to appreciate where this came from, because that's how you keep it from being just this on-brand. So
we are custodians, in a way, right?
I think of our experience, and that's personal. You know what I mean? That's gonna be personal for everybody who's there.
But the collective experiences of, say, you, me, and 12 other guys, all that are basically in the same situation, around the same age,
right?
Have kids, still play a hobby that we started playing when our brains weren't even fully developed.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
Right. So we're still playing. Toys. Yeah. We're still playing toy soldiers. We're still passionate with toy soldiers. And we're still passionate about it. Are we the caretakers that now have to ensure that there's something to move forward, or is it just going to move forward on its own?
I think it's going to move forward
regardless of what it is.
I think at this point it's going to move. It's a big business. It's going to move forward no matter what we do. I think
if Games Workshop's bottom line is anything to go by, it will.
It will. Sure. Yeah. I think for me the thing that's the most important is to keep an open mind to where it's going, right? Like I think the hardest thing when you have something, and this is again ties back to the dangers, maybe that nostalgia thing, is being afraid of where it might go. Because to me, the most important part about this industry is that it sparks imagination and a level of ability to commit and work and make something.
Well, it's a hobby. It's not a pastime. It's a hobby, right?
It's not, and
that's why when people tell me, "Oh, what do you do?" I play video games. I'm like, well. No, you bought it. You bought an Xbox. You bought some games, and you play games. That's a pastime. That's not
the difference.
And that's not to sound like an arrogant, pretentious prick that I am.
It's just pretentious enough.
It's just the right amount. It's just the right amount that I know I'm right.
So to me, to put a definition on what you're talking about, to me, the difference between a hobby and a pastime is a hobby is fun that you create yourself. So it's creating something. It's the process of getting to the reward is the hobby, is the thing that you're doing. And I do think that video games can be a hobby if you're manipulating the game. So like, for instance, I think that a game like Minecraft can be a hobby in that you're creating something inside the environment. I think that a game where, or even like fighting
but
games,
again,
like,
Minecraft, you're committing to learning skills, right?
And that's why I think like Street Fighter can also be a hobby, right? Whereas if it's no, it's true though.
Did you hear my groan?
I did hear your groan, but hear me out. If it's just entertainment being projected onto you, right? That's different.
Well, it's
not asking anything of you.
Active, but again.
So I think the medium's not important. I think it's what you're doing. Are you being entertained, or are you actively involved in whatever the process is? If you're actively involved, you have some agency, then it's a hobby. If you don't have any agency,
but are you actively involved? So to use Street Fighter as an example, there are professional Street Fighters.
There's
the big Capcom festival that one of my favorite wrestlers just recently hosted.
Oh, that's awesome.
Kenny Omega, who's he's a big like Capcom nerd. And so he loves all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so for him, he hosts it. He attends tournaments. For him that's like a professional outlet. And I'm not saying you have to be a professional in order to basically claim some sort of engagement with video games.
Right.
But I don't think, to me, and this is just my opinion, and I'm probably wrong because I'm just set in my ways.
I'll tell you what I think afterwards.
I don't think. And this is probably just a whole other tangent and a whole other argument. But what I'm about to say is going to rile a lot of feathers. Being a miniature hobbyist is so above being a guy who puts his baseball hat on backwards and plays video games.
No, I completely disagree. I completely disagree. So the level of information that if you ever want,
down a peg, man.
I've
already put myself up there.
If you ever want to read a great book about competitive games in general, there's a guy named Serling who writes a book about it's called, I can't remember what it's called, something about scrubs. Don't be a scrub. And he played competitive Street Fighter and competitive fighting games. And the level
but that's professionally.
So listen to me. Hear me out. The reason why it's more engaging than an experience being projected onto you is because, one, typically you're playing with another person. And so the difference between playing that and having just entertainment projected onto you is you're interacting with another person in real time.
Sure.
And then two, the game has rules that you can learn and exploit in order to be better at it than somebody else.
Sure.
Right? Whereas if you are just riding a rail shooter, or even those ones, you could take them to a certain level, but a lot of like less intuitive games, like sort of these like action RPGs and stuff, while there is an element of learning to them, and I think there are people who actually do play games as a hobby, some of them are just things that you experience. Most of those games, they require you to learn a skill in order to be good at them. Okay. And so for me, they're a hobby. And then there's people who just literally play games as a hobby, trying to understand the mechanics behind games. Whereas if it's just entertainment being projected onto you, like watching another Netflix TV show, to me, it's a pastime. Sure. If I'm passionate about watching TV.
I don't consider watching TV a pastime. I consider it just a distraction.
Well, it passes the time.
So here's my sort of my rebuttal to that is, in general, you can have a passing relationship with video games.
Right. You can have a passing relationship with video games too, though. You can now.
With a board game. With
what's a board game? What's a miniature game? This is what's
driving me nuts.
What's a board game? What's a miniature game?
And this is why I gotta close those gates, Ash.
So is X-Wing a miniature game?
I don't play X-Wing.
Yeah, but
it's pre-painted miniature.
But is it a miniature game?
No, it's a board game.
Okay.
No, X-Wing is a miniature game.
It's a miniature game. And there's
the same way Mage Knight was a miniature game.
And there's hobbyists that play X-Wing. It has people who
people who repaint the model, sure, but again, there's a level of engagement there that's not casual. You can have a casual relationship with video games. I think it's very hard to have a casual relationship with the miniature hobby.
Fair enough. All I'm saying is, I think the difference between a pastime and a hobby is actually the attitude of the person relating to it, not the medium itself. That's my answer.
Well, sure.
So you can make a hobby of video games.
You can make a hobby of anything then. Games.
You can, yes.
Believe me, I've made a hobby of certain things that,
All I'm just saying is, you're not up here, Chris. You're not up here. We're all here together. We're all on the same level. If you want to make a hobby of something, you can. No, that's all I'm saying.
I'm taking down a peg. A whole peg.
But again, you're very passionate about your hobby, and that's a good thing. You want to be on the right side of history as far as what's a miniature game.
And you know what? It's funny because you and I, and this is a Games Workshop managerial operations tool is talking about the hobby heroes.
Yep.
Engaging and having those hobby heroes in your stores. And I've been both the hobby hero in a store,
right,
and I've been the hobby villain in a store,
right,
throughout my time.
You have definitely,
and it just mainly has to do with, you know, what I.
Your relationship with the hobby.
My relationship with the hobby at that time, right? And so when I was the hobby hero, you know, even when I was the hobby villain, I was kind of the anti-hero. I want to paint myself that way. I was like the Clint Eastwood of Games Workshop.
Like
yeah.
Take off your $1,000 sunglasses and throw them away.
That's right. Where's the eyebrow?
You're Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Not Hulk Hogan. To bring in the rest
I ran that line between babyface and shit heel. But, you know.
You're not
like Roddy Piper. I was cool, man. I was fucking cool.
Oh my God, worlds are colliding right now.
Oh yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what our topic with this. I don't know what you're gonna call this episode.
I'm gonna call it "Following Your Passions." That's what I'm gonna call it, "Following Your Passions," because that's all we've done all today is talking about things you're passionate about and how you can harness that into making content. You can harness that into putting something out there, just creation wise.
And again, like what we sort of talk about is that there's really no right or wrong way because it's all personal to you, right? And it's all your experience, and you're the product of all your experiences, right up until this moment. That's what the present is. That's what I tried to explain to my kid when I was trying to explain to her what time was.
What time is?
You know?
That's right.
She's like, what's time? And I'm like, okay, so we are existing now. Time is how we measure then.
That's right. Everything happened before is then, and everything's going to happen in the future is the future. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think that there's a your relationship with something tends to define how you feel about it, right? Yeah. And so for you have definitely been the hobby villain, you've definitely been the hobby hero. And that like level of passion can actually drive you to be both. I think a lot of the negativity we see online is people who were passionate about something. Yeah. And that passion's become misdirected into shitting on stuff. Yeah, gatekeeping. And we were talking, well, not just gatekeeping, but just shitting on stuff in general. Yeah. Because your outlet for your passion has become criticizing it now versus the way it used to be. But I mean,
like, ultimately, like, you know, making jokes about how things were better in the good old days. Right. They weren't. But that's just my, like, but again, it's like, it's my experience, and I'm gonna just express that as humor because. Yeah.
Well, that's my again. I said this at lunch. This is my caution to people who are going to make something and put it out there, is that your passion can take you to dark places. Right? And if you're going to shit on something, if you're going to be negative, you will attract 100% the wrong type of people and following and attention. And while that might feel like a certain level of success and popularity, it is not. It is
there's
people,
no longevity to it.
It's not even longevity. It's that people who want to be negative about something, you can never be a different way. If you start saying something good about it, they will instantly turn on you. Right? And two, it's only destructive.
You can't have granular opinions. We're moving into a very black and white.
Absolutely, sort of. But shitting on something is a forever slippery slope because when you start shitting on something, one, the people that follow you will never allow you to like it again, and two, you're not adding anything to it. If what you're doing instead is saying, you know what, I would rather it was this way. Here's my take on it, and making something, that's not shitting on it. That's not saying that it's bad. It's saying, in my perfect world, it would work like this. So I'm going to create a version of this that I like. Yeah. Versus, this is fucking garbage. No one should look at it. No one should play it. You're a bad fucking person if you do.
Rage of Sigmar. All the people who just... Rage of Sigmar when 8th edition died and Age of Sigmar was announced and just the people losing their mind on the internet. I love Rage of Sigmar
because it's like looking at a time capsule of just like the fucking angry shit on the internet. Like,
it was great because it was just an aggregator of all the hatred being and anger and the the misplaced aggression of people just feeling like their hobby was being torn away from them.
Well, passion, right? It's taking that to a negative dark place.
And that's that negative passion. That's that sort of like that obsession that can
lead to you being negative. And if you're going to make
your
content,
army on fire in your backyard.
Well, there is a certain level of it's funny, it was the old Star Wars mantra of like the dark side is all power up front. And it's a fast road to like what feels like instant success, but it caps out really fast, versus making something is a long, slow process, but it has infinite it can build infinitely, basically. I think that's what making negative content is online, is you can attract a lot of attention really fast and feel like you're gaining a lot of momentum. But actually, the vast majority of people out there don't want to just be shitty and unhappy and yell about things.
No.
It feels that way.
But, well, we also have to remember that there are people who have made a career out of shitting on things.
Yeah.
Right? And they've been successful at it, feeding the beast, right?
Yeah.
Like feeding that offended idea, like both sides.
All I'm saying is it doesn't get you anything but attention. You'll never have someone like want to work with you. You'll never have somebody want to make something with you. You'll never have somebody, you'll never be able to run a business off it. You can't advertise through it. You know what I mean? Like just being shitty about stuff. It's a platform that does nothing but attract more shit, right? So there is no benefit to it. There's no upside, and you can be critical, but be critical constructively. You can be constructive and make something new or give your version of what you think something should be. That's great. That's fine. People should do that. But just being negative and pointing out flaws in things constantly, and if that's the kind of content you want to make, of just like, here's my top 10 list of the reasons why Age of Sigmar is a garbage game from a psychological point of view.
Who would make that kind of a video?
I don't know. Like it doesn't it doesn't add anything.
No.
And you're not. It might feel like you're being successful, but you're not building a foundation.
Well, you're getting
you can
engagement,
build anything onto.
but is that engagement anything that you can then?
Well, is that company that you're criticizing ever going to work with you?
Yeah.
Right?
No,
are those designers ever going to want to talk to you? Or like, if that's the case, you're always on the outside of the thing you're talking about because you're just throwing rocks at it forever. And I think that's, if we're off of like best practices and onto like do's and don'ts, that is my number one don't, is throwing rocks for the sake of throwing rocks. You will always forever be on the outside of the thing you're passionate about from then on. You either have to completely reinvent yourself and change your name and change all your accounts and like just become on as somebody else again.
Again, I mean, that goes back to sort of like old salesman's tactics in a lot of ways, where it's projecting that positive, passion and exuberance for something, and not even. And the thing is, if it's something that you are generally,
then it's genuine.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're not faking it.
So you don't have to fake it, and that's, I think, sort of comes to like. Why do you think you'll only be successful if it's something that you really truly love? And it's because it's that genuine.
Well, that's how you see these small businesses that are successful for 30 years. That guy that owns like a hockey shop, you know what I mean, that sharpens skates. That little man that's been passionate about hockey his whole life, and his whole family's worked in the store, and like he's just got this rack. And it's not the biggest shop, not the nicest shop, but it's been there for 40 years, and people go back to them. It's because that person built a business around something that they loved. Yeah. And it's the same with, like, you could be making dresses, you could be running a coffee house. Like, well, you and I ate lunch in Mate, which is a fantastic downtown restaurant, hangout, stage. Yeah. Like, it would be like a beatnik coffee shop, basically, you know what I mean? Like in the 70s. And Chris, who opened that shop, he loves food. And I know
I gotta change my name, man.
But and it's funny because my neighbor upstairs works there. Loves food, loves art, loves people, and just literally opened a room in St. Catharines where all those things exist in the same place, right? So he's hanging local artist art on the walls.
Yeah, it's great.
He has a spot for people to use it. The food's really good.
Sandwich. That
food's fantastic. And that's an example, I think, of if you just surround yourself by things that you like and you're passionate, you don't have to. You can be successful. You have to fake selling something. That comes back to that whole idea of like, if you try and do what's the most popular, it's never gonna be genuine because you're not actually excited about it. Like I don't and this is funny because it's a misconception. I don't like 40K. I like 40K. I like playing 40K with my friends. You know what I mean? Playing it the way that we like to play it. But I'm never just going to pump out a 40K video every day.
You don't want to chase that meta. You're not a tournament 40K player. Right?
I don't even think you need to be a tournament 40K player. I think you should always be doing stuff with something new. You know what I mean? If you're always just using the new army and the new lists and the new units, that's enough right now.
Chasing meta.
If you're just chasing the zeitgeist, I guess is more what it would be.
Gotta get that next fix.
But I couldn't do that. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm not personally interested in it, and it would eventually come across that I'm just exhausted and tired and bored. And you can tell that. You can probably tell that when I played a game too much. I'm sure if you comment on like watching my videos, you've watched a lot of them. You can tell when I'm done with something. Yeah. Just by the way that I film it and the way that I get, and like, and I'm just like, we all know how this is gonna end. Let's just get this done. And like my enthusiasm for it like drains.
Last game of 40K I played, we didn't get past the second turn.
Really?
Because I was done.
Right.
And I wasn't just done with that game. I was done with 40K.
You got out of your system. You were done playing it for a little while.
But again, it was like I painted the army, built the army,
The
played a
getting ready to play
games.
part.
Yeah,
that's right.
And it was that for me. That's the hobby is the preparing to play, and it's one of the reasons why I love why going back and reading the 3rd edition Warhammer rule set is realizing that when you sit down to play, you're doing an hours of prep work building an army list.
Yeah.
You know, and
far more went into getting ready
out.
than actually doing it.
There's a huge amount of pre-game.
But to get the GM ready.
Yeah. And there's a huge amount of pre-game that doesn't really... That, again, to make the game more accessible, GW chipped away at that sort of stuff to make army building easier. And I think that's the biggest difference between 3rd and 4th edition, is 4th edition introduced the army books.
Right.
So each army had their own book, and that made the game way more accessible because it made list building really easy. Not easier than definitely previous editions had.
Good. Wow.
So, I don't know.
I think that you got to do the part that you were most passionate about, and then you ran out of steam as soon as you hit the part that you weren't as excited about.
I'm a hobbyist. I'm a painter, and a dreamer.
A dreamer.
A lot more than I am an actual player of games.
That's fair. Yeah. And when you get to that end state, it's kind of like well.
And when all the games start to feel the same.
Yeah.
And then you want to do something different, and you want to my feeling now is what I want to do is I want to use this hobby to tell stories.
Good.
And that's sort of where
your brain's at. That's what you're passionate about.
And what I'm sort of formulating and what I sort of feel like I want to do in terms of presenting that to people. But yeah, so I mean, essentially, I like to tell stories.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I playing 6th edition Skirmish with you.
Right.
Really sort of brought back that idea of telling stories. I was like, the young Prince Lorand, and he's venturing forth.
They have a life.
Glory.
It's not just, they're not just things. They have a life.
I miss the days when I used to give all my miniatures names.
Yeah. You sent me a text. You sent me a text where you're like, a true orc player names all of his orcs. Yeah. It was just like an army list with every single model in the army.
Of these guys that you saw
has a name.
They all have a name.
Are they here? Did you hand me the paper that has names on it?
No,
yes, you did.
Oh, I did.
You got Nagrub de Biggin, Maglug de Biggin, Uzdrug de Boy, Draggerty the Boy, Shakgor, Durfug, Ogbad, Scuzz and Buzz, they're goblins.
Scuzz and Buzz, man.
Grunk, Spunk, and Runk, Erg, Lurg, and Kurg, the Stickas, Bosgit, where's the trolls? I'm gonna find him. Diggit the Wolf Boy, Ugbutt the River Troll, and Marty the Stone Troll, Thugor the Ogre. That's right. Everybody has a name.
Those are Grim Tough's boys.
Yep.
And that's Grim Tough Damala, and he is the gaffer of Dung Top Hill.
That's awesome. And if they ever lose Dung Top Hill, they just go poop on their hill.
Yeah, well that's how they
that's how you make it Dung Top Hill.
He's like, look, you can't just go around shitting on the tops of mountains.
Fuck, I can't. Fucking joke's on you. Yes, I can.
You go shit on top of a mountain and call it yours.
Joke's on you, motherfucker. I
come get it, man.
That's right, exactly. No, that's great. Well, I think that's the power basically of being passionate about something and using it to make the thing that you're excited about. The thing you make is going to be better. You'll make it for longer. You'll be consistent. You'll avoid pit traps and running out of steam, and you're going to make something that nobody else is making because it's coming from you. It's unique because it's based on, like you said, your experiences and what you do. Right. So I think that's probably as good a place as any to round this out. I hope you guys enjoyed this Let's Talk. This was not really a follow-up episode to the nostalgia one, but I think it definitely touched on some of the same beats, which is if you're passionate about something, it doesn't matter what it is. It's going to be personal. If you want to use it to make content, and I did talk about some of the best practices in there, I think those are great jumping off points. They're not what anyone wants to hear usually, because I think a lot of time when I get messages, it's they're trying to find the cheat code. They're trying to find what's the best way to get to succeed, and I don't have the answer to that because I don't really.
I think the only answer is work.
Is work, yeah. It's a grind. It's a grind, but also it's about grinding the right things the right way, and all the self-evaluation I do.
It's about leveraging the passion.
And trying to find like-minded people that are also passionate about what you're passionate about. Because I think you mentioned it halfway through this is that so much of what I've accomplished on the backs of I have really talented friends that are willing to come in and do this with me and make this successful, and I'm just so lucky to have not just in this area, but even just online, passionate people everywhere who appreciate, I guess, this industry and have a passion for this industry the same way that I do. And I've been super lucky to have that. And I don't know how you imitate that except for by saying, if you're excited about something and you make something positive and you make it all the time to the best of your ability, and you do it in a way that people, can expect and is accessible and people can get to, then over time, it's that old saying that success is just effort over time.
Yeah. Well, and make it what you want it, what you would want it to be, right? So like, treat people the way you want them to treat you, and make content the content you would want to see.
Yeah,
and there are definitely other people out there who are going to want to see that same sort of content.
Yep, and it seems to be working out so far. I think the problem with overanalyzing it is you make something that isn't genuine anymore, and so I'm not saying I intentionally keep my head in the sand, but I'm not a person that watches a ton of stuff online, but I'm a person that loves building, painting, and playing games with toy soldiers, and so just documenting that and putting it online is my passion. You know what I mean? And so I hope people watching this, that if that's useful in any way, great. I mean, ask me. I'll check the comments for this and try and reply as much as I can on any specific questions. But the details are all going to be up to you. What your comfort level is with technology, how you want to project what you're going to make, and even what it is. It can be writing books. It can be writing games. I get the same questions about writing rule sets that I do about making videos, and it's the same answer: is, well, how many games have you written? I want to be a game designer. Okay, well, how many games have you written? I've never written a game before. Okay, so you don't want to be a game designer. Sorry, you don't want to write games. You like the idea of writing games. Until you've written games, you're not a game designer yet. Anyone can be a game designer just by starting to write a game and then playing it. Write something, get someone to play it with you. Well, you're a game designer.
So here's a story just to
wrap it up.
Just to keep this going longer.
Okay.
Back when I worked for Games Workshop the first time, which was 1994.
The white t-shirt days?
Is
the white t-shirt days?
I worked at the Queen Street store for about 10 months. And the manager went over to the UK and came back and was very super hyped because he had just gone to the UK and been to the studio and blah, 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 and sort of was asking, there's so much opportunity and we can work anywhere, blah, blah, blah. And he was asking the staff, where in the company, where would you want to work? And half the staff were like, I want to work
design
in
studio.
Design studio, because that's the answer that everyone gives, right? And I said, I want to work in the foundry because I want to pour hot metal into molds. He's like, that's the weirdest answer. I'm like, I don't know why. It's what I want to do.
I used to get that in interviews all the time. Where do you see yourself at workshop? And it was always the design studio. And my answer was usually, well, you're not going to get there from here. If you want to be in a design studio, but you start writing games. Yeah, you're going to learn. You might learn about the culture.
Just start writing. In general.
But just writing in general.
Short stories. Write games. I mean, most of my 90% of all my writing is based around my hobby.
Right.
I used to write D&D story, or modules or adventures.
Yeah.
Preparing material for things like that. Dark Heresy.
Yeah, whole campaigns Dark Heresy.
And now I'm sort of. What I'm working on, the secret Oldhammer project, is essentially just It's essentially telling stories.
Yeah. I think it's the just doing it part of that answer that people sometimes aren't expecting. You know what I mean? Like, well, what do you mean? There's no there isn't a ground level position in game design. It's like, no, you just start writing things and playing games, and it's to me I feel bad giving that answer, but there isn't another answer. No. Like you can maybe get a job somewhere where you learn how to write, but typically people hire for that skill initially. So if you're not already doing the thing that you want to be doing, you're not going to get an entry level position designing games. I mean, after writing a whole bunch of games, you might get an entry level position developing games before you're allowed to go write a game. But that's a whole I think parallel to just making content is you have to start doing it already. If it's the right thing for you to be doing, you couldn't not be doing it already. You know what I mean? If you're going to be a game designer, you'd have been writing games for you and your friends since you were kids, because that's a thing that you're so passionate about that you couldn't not be doing it. And that's, I think, to me, the hard part for some people is they like the idea of doing something because they like the end result, but they're not actually excited about the work. And if you're excited about the work, though, that's when you're on the right track. That's when you're like,
that's what you gotta
find. You gotta find the thing that you're excited about doing the work itself. Because then the product is the culmination of the thing you're most excited about doing. And again, that is the backbone upon which GMG is built, is that I love sitting and talking to Chris and bullshitting so you guys can listen to it. I love building toy soldiers and making tables and all of that craft stuff that goes into making a game. I love learning new rules. And I love jumping into different worlds and just stomping my feet around and getting everything muddy. That's, to me, that is the most enjoyable part of what I do. And so the end result of that is what you watch, but it's the work that I actually like doing, right? So that's why people are like, how can you make a video every day? It's like, well, how can I not go to work every day and make a new thing? That's fun. And I've enjoyed the parts where I get to incorporate the cameras and the editing and all that stuff too, as part of that process, basically. And I'm lucky in that I didn't hate that part either. I enjoyed that part too, and it just got incorporated into the work. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this.
Yeah. You're a very passionate man.
I'm pretty passionate.
Yeah, let's turn these cameras off so we can make out.
Anyway, I do want to say happy holidays, everybody. No matter what you celebrate, I'll be off for the next week or so. So if I'm slow answering messages or whatever, I'm gonna take time with my family and basically be off until probably Sunday. What's Sunday? So the 25th is Wednesday. So 26, 27, 28. So the 28th I'll probably be gone, and then 29th I'll be back at work, back in here, filming stuff and doing stuff the week after. So for wherever you are in the world and whatever you're celebrating, whatever you're doing, if it's a normal week, then have a great week. And if you're celebrating something, then have a great holiday. Next time, I'm Ash, this is Chris. Have a great night.